Hey guys, Peter Franson here from Spirit Blade Productions. This is part 4 of the commentary for Spirit Blade: A World of Shadows. If you've been having any trouble with the balance between the volume of my voice and the volume of the track of the scenes that I'm listening to, you can adjust that. I've tried to put most of my voice in the right channel, your right channel, and more of the audio drama in the left channel. So if you can adjust your stereo panning, that's one way to do it. Or if you're able to just turn your desktop speakers a little bit, that might help as well. But I'll continue to try to improve that balance for you guys. All right, let's get into this part.
What do you want?
All right, well, Mercy is an adaptation of an old obscure hymn from the 1912 Presbyterian Psalter called God Be Merciful to Me. The original is in major, and I switched it to minor to kind of match the sorrowful, repentant tone of the lyrics better, and because I just like dark-sounding music. I modified the lyrics a bit to remove words that aren't in the Spirit Blade universe vocabulary, like God, Savior, etc., and also to remove some of the archaic language and make it a little more timeless. And then I also swapped parts of verses around some to suit my needs. This brought tears to my eyes when I was initially mixing this opening and dropping these flashback scenes in, and again when I did something similar in the scene that follows. And that's me layered a bunch of times to create that men's chorus, if you couldn't tell. The original version has Saulo actually singing that first verse. So in the song bundle, I believe I've included a version where he sings that first verse, but we also recorded a spoken version which I used to help kind of sell his emotional investment in the words of this whole song and their connection to his guilt regarding the torture of Merrick and Dark Ritual. It's a pretty simple song. I think I kind of gravitate these days toward electronic music that is not super active and complex, but has minimal kind of chord changes. I like drones. I like just having some open space to expose the vocals a little bit. And I think that I probably lean toward that because of my background. My education was as a vocal performance major, and where the voice is key, and it's usually very exposed in vocal music. The bridge here is from Depth of Mercy, which is a hymn by Charles Wesley with a tune written in the early 1800s. And again, I adjusted the lyrics here to suit my needs aesthetically, but the core of the meaning is still there. This is a pretty simple song, but it's one of my favorites from World of Shadows. I might someday produce some kind of a solo music album primarily made up of songs from this trilogy and then maybe a few additional new ones that I'll create, but and songs from the trilogy specifically that I will re-record that are normally in the trilogy sung by other characters besides Merrick, because I end up giving some of the songs that I would personally most love to sing to other actors. A lot of the ballads that Rand sings, and certainly this would be an example. I would love to sing this one myself for a recording sometime, even though I'm already singing a chunk of it as the men's chorus. I continue to enjoy that juxtaposition of the ancient with the futuristic, if you will, or modern sound. So like we've got these old kind of like very formalized types of vocals in the men's chorus, and in just how the melody is, constructed is fairly traditional, and then we've got that mixed with a lot of electronic sounds and artificiality to the track. We don't have a lot of songs like these in contemporary church worship, outside of the much more traditional branches of Christianity. Songs that are about mourning and about repenting and mourning your sin. And so I've find these lyrics to be wonderful and very useful for us today, and not to be neglected. Salos' prayer here after the song is just like freaking straight from my diary. You know, I don't literally have a diary, but I haven't tortured anyone, but the more I take a hard look at myself, the more I see the sinful patterns and tendencies that I just want to be done with and free from, and it's hard to trust sometimes that God truly sees me when he looks at me as pure and forgiven and righteous because of what Christ has done on my behalf, that Christ's record is really placed over top of my own. And like Salo says, my heart's battling my mind, you know, it's all those kinds of problems that can lead you to a legalistic view of redemption, which is unbiblical. And I think that's important why it's important to focus on truth, as Salos is trying to do here. I never would have done this kind of silent exchange between Merrick and Salos here in Spirit Blade 1, for example. In the scripting and pacing of that project, I was still drawing so much inspiration from audio dramas that had come before, instead of film and TV that had come before, you know, like I do now. I take much more inspiration from film and TV as to how I edit and direct audio drama. And other audio dramas are doing more of that now, too. You know, there's so little that's said at the beginning of the scene, and instead I try to use the silence or the pace of Merrick's entrance and walking in to communicate the nature of the relationship between these two. And speaking of hearts and minds battling, I mean, that's what Merrick is hitting here, too. I mean, he knows it's right to forgive Salos, but he just can't forget what happened.
At least with my head, that I can't judge you because I need forgiveness like everyone else, but none of that...
Again, you know, even just mixing this for the first time and selecting and adding in these torture clips and then the music adding under that, it was really moving for me. I think I was crying the first time I started putting together the very beginning of this scene, and then some also when I was mixing this. Merrick's life was just kind of ruined in Dark Ritual, and he's trying to escape from that all throughout this story. And Salos is also trying to just escape and undo the horrible things that he did in Dark Ritual.
How could looking at me ever bring anything good to your mind?
Rand thinks we need you.
Forgiveness is messy, you know. We say we forgive people, we try to forgive people, but it's so hard to forget and really not continue to hold things against them.
Salos?
That's Nolan Pavlich again on the intercom, pitched up a little so you hopefully don't recognize him as the guy that was the younger guy that was in the Atlantis monitor room at the beginning. Just a little bit of artifacting on his voice from repitching that I couldn't get rid of, but hopefully that's interpreted as an artifact of the intercom system.
Let's go.
Now, Francisco asks, what is the thinking behind why Newsnet has updated its version number since Spirit Blade 1? And that's really just because we're used to that with technology. I get updates all the time from my iPhone or my PC software, so I figure every 6 months or so it gets updated. And Newsnet was at 4.0 in the first one and had probably just gotten the voice of Des Carowin added to it, given Ebony's remark in the first scene of Spirit Blade 1. I would have jumped to 5.0 if Joy Curry hadn't come back to record for Des again, but since she did, I kept it in the 4s and just updated to 4.3. With the Shada ultimatum here, I really wanted to try and portray the fact that this was an announcement that was for everyone, and everyone everywhere was seeing and hearing this. So we go from outdoor traffic to here a family living room, and then to a bar, and that's my youngest, by the way, playing both kid voices in the family, and I let him play in my office for a while, and then I think I just stared at him smiling at one point, which led to him asking, Daddy, what are you doing? You know, and I think when he was crying here in just a second, after I add the sound of a toy dropping or breaking or something, I had just told him that it was time for his nap. So, and again, that's Mark Pennington who plays the dad and tells my kid to go away. Here's Nolan Pavlich again.
Hey, everybody shut up!
There's Nolan again. I made several passes at this scene. I originally put the council through more of a loudspeaker effect during cuts to different locations, you know, so it would be indicated that it's playing off of some kind of media device instead of the council being in that room. But that made them harder to understand, and they're already hard to understand sometimes, so I had to kind of back away from that approach and risk their voice sounding a little bit too clean, you know, for being played back on some kind of device. But I figured it was better to understand what they were saying, which still might be a little bit challenging. It's hard every time I do that. You know, I really, because I'm doing the voice of the council, and it's just me layered over and over and over again at different pitches and stuff, and I really have to enunciate all of my words. And consonants and vowel shapes all need to be exaggerated.
As Atlantis Incorporated reorganizes in the wake of the attacks, the World Church of Unity, long ally and advisor to Atlantis and the Global Federation, has begun strategizing a response to the Shaden Ultimatum, which they have committed to helping the new leadership of Atlantis execute. Althea Price, director and current prophet of the WCU, made this statement earlier today.
We have long stood against the intolerance inherent.
So again, I'm just kind of doing some. I've not done prior to this really any. This, you know, despite this being really character driven, it's possible I also do the most world building in this one, which surprises me a little bit. But you know, here I'm developing the World Church of Unity through the character of Althea, and I think it's easier for me to spend time world building when I feel like it's going to affect character development later on.
Okay, none of that sounds good. Any thoughts?
And I feel like Althea's character has a direct effect on, you know, some conflict and character conflict, you know, later on. I wanted to make sure that listeners who knew their Bibles understood that there was still a massive threat here. You know, I didn't want the tension to all be removed by those people who were like, well, we know the world's not going to end this way. Well, true, the world wasn't going to end, and they recognize that, but the Bible leaves significant room for the world to go horribly wrong before Christ returns. It doesn't have to be the end times for a lot of us to find ourselves sitting in an ash heap someday.
And the attacks on Atlantis have strained their organization. Other Federation military powers, and I use the term loosely, don't have near the level of weapons tech that Atlantis has. In any case, the Shada are ancient demons. Given their accumulated knowledge,
You can always count on Rand for some exposition, right? Poor guy.
Close to their best technology with us.
So once that attack ship gets here, we're glitched.
That sounds about right.
Unless we...
It's almost the nature of audio drama, though, that like a much higher percentage of lines are going to be expository. Because you have to describe and talk about things. That's the way the plot moves forward, you know? I try to stretch where I can and use non-verbal storytelling. But in audio drama, that's you hit those limits pretty darn quick.
One Newsnet stream.
Jag, everybody's announcing things today. Why didn't we sign up?
Now, Vincent here is representing both terrorists and the types of radical quote-unquote Christians featured in the media often when we turn on the news. He is the worst possible public representation of a Christian, and this scene is about reflecting the feeling that I think many Christians have when someone calling themselves a Christian does or says something that publicly misrepresents what the Bible teaches and what Christianity is. There's a layer where it's personally insulting and we don't like how that paints us, and I think we kind of just need to let go of that. But the other part that is legitimately frustrating is how it potentially distorts the truth and creates this twisted representation of what the Bible teaches and who Jesus is. And that can just, you know, everyone's still responsible for their choices and their whether or not they pursue truth, but distortions of the truth like this can still kind of like encourage someone to just avoid examining the claims of the Bible that's already kind of bent in that direction.
Changes starting now.
Aya, optic interface, dimensional filter.
The Shada gave you a week.
Activated.
Lock on Saurus.
Sounds good to me.
Lock.
1 week to terminate any.
So all this stuff had to be timed, you might notice, so that you could still hear what Vincent was saying and have their lines pop in, but it still have the dialogue have kind of a natural pace when the two are separated.
Vessel gets here, I'll destroy
Tricky
it.
stuff.
And then target any non-seekers next, based on their RCF profiles. That will be easy.
Boy, this music, I love this. All these music options I was able to find. It really sells it so much.
Only at first, but you'll get there.
It really elevates the whole thing, in my opinion, far above what I, with my limited skills, can create. Although it does still take some editing to make sure that the music is cut in a way. I have to recut it to fit the scene and the dramatic build and climax of the scene.
Stopped it sooner.
Me too.
Well, that was pretty much everything that kept me from Seekers my whole life. Ebony too, I think. Now in the script, the scene actually ends after Rand says he'll go check on Ebony, but I added Merrick calling him back and saying a few things quietly to him about Ebony to help build into Ebony's character and her story arc some more, and also set up her insecurities about her appearance a little more strongly. And then after this, I just borrowed a "thank you, Merrick" from one of Rand's other scenes where he says that.
She's never thought of herself as attractive.
Yeah, I know, she's crazy. But see, that was just a little servo swivel. I didn't have Rand say anything, but it was there to imply a, like, she doesn't think she's attractive, you know, and which Merrick kind of bounces off that.
Thank you, Merrick.
All right. That's it. Stay tuned next time for part 5. Thanks for watching.